This is Nobody Cares. I was a member at the Herbal Health Center in Vernon, which is a medical marijuana dispensary. I just simply said to my doctor, who was, of course, well aware of my pain issues, that I'd like to try the CBD oil or products. And he said, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's try that. And he just simply turned to his computer, typed out, it was no more than 2 sentences, printed it off on stationery that had his letterhead on it, and signed it, handed it to me. And I took that down to Vernon, and becoming a member was just a formality after that. You went in, and there was a foyer, and with a desk and a computer there, and there was always somebody in attendance or nearby, and they simply checked your membership. It didn't take long. And then entry into the dispensary was electronically controlled, and they just pushed a button and the door would open, and then you entered the dispensary. I really enjoyed going there. In the back, there was always at least 2 employees, several girls that worked there that were, quite happy and friendly and knowledgeable as well. And I did have a lot of questions, and they were about the CBD. And I was also curious about the edibles. I wanted to get some edibles. The whole experience was always very, very pleasant. There was always other people there. I never was there when there wasn't anybody else. And I watched several purchases. Everything was on display there. Nothing was hidden. All the different varieties of weed that they had, and all the other products. I'm not going to go on about all of that. If somebody was buying some bud, the jar was brought down. The scale was set up in front of the customer. The amount that he wanted was weighed out and then put into a Ziploc bag, appropriate size Ziploc bag. And then if that was the end of his purchases, the sale was rung up through the register with GST, PST charged, and they accepted, of course, debit, credit card, and cash always. I probably shopped there, I don't know, 6 times, something like that, before they were finally forced to shut down. And I think that coincided with legalization. They were given some warning that they needed to do this, and they did. Many down in the Lower Mainland did not. And, I'll just say, every time I went there was a positive experience. You made your purchases, paid for it, paid all the taxes. They had these little tiny paper shopping bags, really miniature with little handles on them. They'd put your purchases in there, and you just simply walked out the door. And I can tell you that never once was I ever worried or concerned or felt any threat from police, or that I was being watched, or that I had even done anything illegal. It just seemed like the most normal thing in the world to do. And I'm just going to add in here too, although it's probably not quite the right spot for it, about the CBD oil. I did everything I could with it, everything they recommended, and probably even a little bit more, for more than a year, and it did nothing for me. So we have all these varieties of weed in Canada, and I just want to take a little bit of time and talk about them. And I'm not any kind of a plant biologist, that's for sure. In fact, I know very, very little about how all this happened, but I know a little bit, and I'm going to just talk about it because I think it's important. The one thing that I do know for sure is that you don't go trekking in the Himalayas and stumble across some new variety of cannabis, okay? So that goes out the window. There's only 2 kinds of weed in the world. One is called indica, and the other is a sativa. And actually, that surprises me that there's 2 different kinds like that, but there is, and they're quite there's distinct differences between the 2 plants. And some very passionate people, I think mainly over in the Netherlands, in fact, I'm pretty sure about that, went to work and started crossbreeding these plants. And it makes sense that a plant that, say, an indica plant that's grown at sea level and for several generations or 100 years or whatever it might be, and an indica plant that's grown at 3,000 feet above sea level in the Himalayas, or maybe even higher than that, would over time develop some different characteristics from the one grown at sea level. And I think you could say the same thing, and probably humidity and temperature and all these things would be a factor in it. And you can say the same thing about the sativa plant, okay? And so just by working with all these different variables, they created hybrids, and which is a cross between the indica and the sativa. And it just has continued on from there, on and on and on and on. And there's literally, I tried to find out how many, but there's hundreds it's way more than hundreds. I don't know how many there is. And so it's really quite amazing that all this has happened. There was no government research, no government money. This is just private individuals that have a passion for this product that developed all of these different strains. Some more suited for indoor, some more suited for outdoor, short plants, tall plants, plants that go into flower sooner, whatever all the variables are. These are all stolen by the government, of course, when they decided to legalize marijuana and kick all these other people out of the business that were responsible for developing all of these. The government just kind of made them their own and banned everybody and called them criminals and said goodbye. Something I've been meaning to do and want to do is talk about women in the business. And I never knew any woman who took the initiative and did her own place, a large room. That is, I'm talking about a small scale probably. There certainly would be, even though I don't know that either. Couples with small grow rooms, certainly. There's all kinds of those. And just because I don't know doesn't mean it's not true, okay? But there were definitely women involved in the business. I knew 3, and 2 of those women were quite high up in the hierarchy, if you want to put it that way. Women that were able to take 10, 12, 15 pounds at a time, perhaps once a month. And the third one was more down in the retail end of things. She worked full-time. She had a job where she worked full-time, and then that was her sideline. And she was really quite a neat chick and quite popular. We also need to talk about the harvest crews. Now, if you're just a small guy, like I just mentioned, couple with a little 4-lighter, you didn't need any help. Maybe a friend would come over and help you harvest. But the bigger rooms, the 24, 40 lighters, you had to have a crew come in. And these guys were really professional and very good at what they did. They would come in. The one thing that you can't have is 3 or 4 guys showing up in the morning and staying all day and then leaving at night, and all these vehicles and all this traffic. You can't have that. So the way it worked is they would all come in together, probably late in or early evening, something like that. One vehicle, and everybody would have their sleeping bag and a little kit bag with them with a toothbrush and a change of clothes in them, and stay there until the job was done. And like I say, these guys were really good. They worked together all the time. Everybody got along. They worked hard, and often and beer was allowed. The stories got better as the day went on, but beer was not a problem. Anybody who was more interested in beer than doing their job would not be around very long. That's for sure. Sometimes the job included more than just trimming the buds as well, but I don't really need to go in that. All this would be known ahead of time anyway. I already talked about women a little bit, and I just wanted to mention here that there's places that would have a gal come in and do the cooking. Little things are always important, and food is important. You're not going to get very far having beans and wieners. It might work once, some guy is looking after it. So you bring in a cook. Maybe the owner, he's already a good cook and is willing to do that. But these guys deserve to be treated properly. Like I say, food is important, and they're going to be there for 3 days. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Right? Breakfast is easy, but a couple of good meat and potato meals for sure every day. So with all this talk about grow rooms and growing weed, there is an elephant in the room, a tough topic, and I'm not going to skip it just because it's a tough topic, and I'm referring to stealing the power. And I'm not going to try and justify it. I'm simply going to make a statement about it so that there's a general understanding about it. Now, there's, thousands, who knows how many small rooms out there, 2 lights, 4 lights, and there was no need to steal the power. But once you got bigger, if you'd made the decision to go big, you had to. You simply could not have your power bill go from $75 or $100 a month to $350, $400 a month, or whatever it might be. You might as well just go down and sign your own arrest warrant. And if you think that the reason was to save money or to improve the bottom line, well, that's ridiculous. You could say that about any business in the world that uses a lot of power. And that's all I have to say. I also wanted to talk about commodities, or the difference between commodities and the commodity and the product. And we're going to use our old friend, the farmer here, the wheat farmer. He grows wheat. Wheat is a commodity. It's traded on the Chicago Commodity Exchange, okay? And you take the wheat and you mill it and you get flour and bran. Well, flour and bran are products, all right? And then you continue on from there. You make bread or shreddies or whatever, okay? I believe that cannabis is a commodity. It's not treated as such, but it has all the characteristics of any other commodity, and I think should be thought of and treated as a commodity. So we talk about hash. I talk about hash like in Morocco. Hashish is a product. You make hash from the cannabis plant. And I'm not going to go into that. I don't really know enough about it. I know a little bit. There's different ways to do it. And when to get to the product, it takes time, it takes labor, there's material that you need, there's equipment, I guess, same thing as material, I suppose. Not really. And storage. The storage is not free. Now, most farmers don't really look at their time involved. I mean, if a farmer did that, it'd be a pretty sad tale how much they actually are earning. But when you consider that you could buy hash in Morocco in 1974, I'm sure it's a lot more than that now, just inflation and who knows whatever, demand perhaps. If you could buy hash then for 25 cents a gram, what the hell was the cannabis, the plant itself worth? Almost nothing, right? Incredible. We used to get this magazine. It was called High Times Magazine, and it came out once a month. And we all kind of looked forward to getting it, but just for the pictures and the stories in there. And we learned, I shouldn't say we, I learned a lot from reading it. And one of my favorite sections in there was near the back, and I forget what it was called, like Marketplace, something like that, and I don't know where they got their information or how they got it or who they trusted with for this information, but it would be a United States-wide, East Coast to West Coast, what was available on the East Coast, West Coast, Chicago, LA, say, Southern Phoenix, different kinds of hash that were available, different kinds of weed that might be available, and the prices that you would expect to pay in those places for these different varieties of smoke. And so that was always quite interesting, and certainly more varied than what we had out there on the prairies or Western Canada for sure. Maybe leaving Vancouver out of this story, like we call it the prairie provinces. Pretty much a desert, really, when it came to all the exotic things that might actually be available. But some of them were, and you may even have heard of these, like Hawaii at some point was growing quite a bit of weed, and there was Kona Gold and Maui Wowie. And again, this would have to be a different seed that came from someplace else, and it was grown seedless, kept the males out of the plots. And I personally never saw any or knew of any that was available in Canada. And just going by what was reported in High Times magazine, how awesome these two were. And of course, it would have the price in there as well. But I don't think they were ever produced in enough quantity to make it really much past the West Coast. I guess interesting about that is Hawaii is actually an American state, and so you could pack your suitcase in Hawaii and land in LA, and there's no customs, right? So had that going for it. And there was other kinds of weed that would show up from around the world. I can remember Thai weed and Cambodian, and even Kenya there for a while. The outdoor production, best known for California, Oregon, out West Coast, did spread across the southern United States down into Florida. And, High Times would report on that, prices and quality. But like I said, this was the Columbian era, and it would have started in the late 70s. I think I'm right when I say that. And then all the way through the 80s. It was just predominantly Colombian weed. That's all you really heard about. And right up until the early 90s when the indoor started. I have to also mention here, I've been meaning to do it right from the very beginning, the business that I know, where I was involved, it was just old friends, okay? Everything was so relaxed that there was no fear, no panic. Forget Hollywood. No, I guess here, I can't really talk about other generations, what was going on there, but I strongly suspect it wasn't much different. I get stories that that probably wouldn't believe. I can remember one time when the hockey playoffs were on, and we're at this place, and there was a major amount of weed in the house that just came in that day, and we're all there doing our thing. And the two principals involved in it were sitting at the table making their bets for the Stanley Cup playoffs. They were more interested in that, so much a game and so much on the series. And but that's just how it was. Anybody that didn't sort of fit in that mold, well, they didn't fit in and would not be around. And you shouldn't think from that we were casual about it or dumb about it. We certainly weren't. Everybody paid attention. Everybody was... but you almost have to have that attitude, that relaxed style about you. If you don't, you'd go crazy, right? So I really wanted to mention that because I'm not sure what the general perception is out there. I fear it's the one that Hollywood and the police have left in everybody's mind. I can even go way back to the 70s when we first ran into that bunkweed. And it was the same thing even back then. Everybody was relaxed. There was it's my whole life, it's been that way. So I've already talked about money a little bit, but I'm going to go on a little bit more about that and more about the small growers. mainly the Okanagan, Shuswap area is what I know about a little bit. And I don't know how many there, couples out there, or single guys that had a spot, with, and would just, hook up a couple bulbs, maybe 4. Like, why not? Every 3 months you get a nice little payday. No problem getting rid of the weed, that's for sure. There was local buyers, and I know, there was a buyer that came in from the lower mainland, and even from down east I heard there was a guy. So all those little purchases, 2 here, 3.5 there, they all add up, and probably these guys knew where there was an 8 lighter or a 12. And anyway, all the weed got bought up. There's no problem there. How much they got? Well, like I talked about earlier, the price did nothing but come down. So it's just hard to say wherever you want to think about it. It's funny, the running joke out in BC was that, nobody had a job, but everybody was driving a new truck. And that's going a little far, obviously, but it does kind of explain how things were. Like, it was good times out there. You could feel the vibe. That extra money that was floating around out there, people, eating out, and whatever all they did with it, the money was in circulation. Mama, she's going shopping, we know that. And maybe some wine for the house, and perhaps something even more serious, like how about some snow tires for the half-ton. I don't think there's anything better for the economy than money in circulation. That 4, 5, 8 grand, whatever it was that you got for your harvest after harvest, you spread that over 3 months. It's really not that much. It's just a nice bonus, adds to your lifestyle, right? No, it was many years ago, decades ago, actually. I was listening, or perhaps it was on TV, to a politician, and he was taking questions. And somehow the topic got around to welfare, and not in a negative way at all. And so the politician said, he was talking about the big check that they cut once a month for the welfare recipients. And he said, well, it's really needed, and of course it is needed. But he said that the really good thing about it is that money goes right back into circulation. Nobody on welfare is hoarding the money. It's desperately needed, and it gets spent. And he said, we as the government know that there's nothing better, really, for the economy than the money in circulation. And in fact, he says, we know that once that money changes hands 9 times, that it all comes back to the government's coffers. Well, thank you, Mr. Premier. You made this pretty easy for me. We have legal weed in Canada now, but what we don't have is equality. I can go to Mexico and buy a bottle of tequila and bring that home duty-free, but I can't go to the state of Oaxaca in Mexico and buy an ounce of their wonderful weed and bring that home with me. I can go to the Caribbean or Jamaica and buy a bottle of rum and bring that home duty-free, but I can't bring home an ounce of their weed. Same thing. Like if I happen to be in Kathmandu, I could go to one of their hash stores where, you could purchase an ounce of their wonderful hand-rubbed hashish and probably even get a receipt for it, but I can't put it in my suitcase and bring it home. And we're not going to have equality here in Canada until I can go to a restaurant and order a pot-infused raspberry vinaigrette for my salad, or go to a sporting event and instead of having a beer or a glass of wine, I can order a marijuana margarita. It's called hypocrisy, it's called discrimination, it's called bullshit.